One of the most attractive things about the 3DO was its promise of 32-bit graphics in 1993. No kidding, we were knee-deep into the run of Sega's Genesis and Nintendo Super NES, two consoles that were powerful in their own right, but far from the visual prowess experienced at your local arcade. The 3DO was to be the first time a home console would truly be capable of highly detailed, textured map 3D polygon graphics at a time when the best 16-bit consoles could muster were little more than choppy, flat-shaded simplicity. While exciting, gamers like me were also looking forward to seeing what the 3DO could do with two-dimensional visuals. Like a lot of you, I had been drawn into the new fighting game craze thanks to the likes of Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat, and if any hardware could mimic those titans, it was the 3DO. As luck would have it, two of the top fighting games of the day were slated for a 1994 release on the 3DO, Capcom's Super Street Fighter II Turbo and SNK's Samurai Showdown. They would go on to be solid conversions themselves, but alas, Mortal Kombat would never appear on the 3DO. In its place, my friends and I became quite enamored with magazine previews for a copycat game called Way of the Warrior. Like Mortal Kombat, it featured digitized graphics, fatalities, and gobs of blood gushing forth from every attack. It sounded so promising at the time, and in this episode, we are gonna see just how all that promise panned out. I hope you guys enjoy my review of Way of the Warrior for the 3DO Interactive Multiplayer. The story here is a knockoff of Mortal Kombat and the movie Evil Dead, centering on a book written in blood of the world's greatest fighters. Every 100 years, a tournament is held to see who is added to the book, and with only one page left, the winner will decide the fate of the great battle between good and evil. Taking place on a mountaintop in the Himalayas, 9 contestants will face one another in combat to the death. The gameplay here is of the variety where the instruction manual is an absolute must. The basics of moving the fighter around are simple enough, but most of the combat is unintuitive and requires specific knowledge of how the controller is used. A is your jab, B is your block, C is your kick, L is your punch, and R is your roundhouse. To get the most powerful forms of your punches and kicks, you must press A and L for the super punch and C and R for your super kick. Taunts are performed by pressing forward and block. Each fighter also has a load of automatic close attacks by pressing forward and your attack button when the opponent is right beside you. This can be a throw, grapple, or any other style of attack. Add in a host of special moves that you can pull off with a quarter circle, double taps, and multiple button presses, and Way of the Warrior has many more ways to attack than your standard fighting game of the day. The fighters themselves are a sad bunch of stereotypical tough guys and gals. A ninja, a soldier, a samurai, various martial artists, and of course the biker. Each one has moves associated with their personalities, and some even have weapons. Unique to Way of the Warrior is Skull Points, a reward system that gives you access to special, game-changing magic. Essentially every move in the game gives you these points, and once you get enough, you can pull off powerful magic that can devastate your foe with a single hit, randomize their controls, heal your own life bar, and many other weird and wonderful effects like shrinking and invisibility. You'll want to find a guide that has these moves because they really can make some of these matches a whole lot easier. As you'd expect of a digitized fighting game, there are also fatalities. Some are stage specific and some are for the characters only. During a fight, your opponent's health will flash when low. Nail them with an attack and they will get up dizzy, prompting the announcer to tell you to finish them off. Each fighter has more than one, so there's plenty of variety there, though none are as well done as Mortal Kombat. As far as modes go, there isn't much beyond the typical tournament against the computer. There is a versus mode that lets you choose your fighter and arena, an options menu that allows you to set various settings like sound volume and difficulty, and a watch mode to observe the computer. As with most fighting games, a timer pushes the action along and makes sure it's resolved quickly. When viewing still images of Way of the Warrior, it's absolutely gorgeous visually. Massive characters and brightly lit arenas with lots of detail still look great in the HD age, so you can imagine what a teenage kid in the 90s would have thought. But this illusion falls apart when the game is played and the action is moving. It instantly devolves into a jerky, overly fast slideshow of digitized nastiness. It's not that the animation itself is terrible, because lots of things seem to have a fair number of frames playing out, especially the nicely rendered backgrounds, but every one of those fighting animations is hyper fast, and gives way to other animations popping off just as speedy. As the match progresses, it's just one move after another, screens zooming in and out, things moving entirely too fast, too jerky, that it overloads your eyes. No kidding, man. Play this game after anything from the era, be it as good as Street Fighter II or as bad as Shaq Fu, and it's unreal how terribly this flows in comparison. It really is a shame because some of the stages have some real personality, and some of the fighters have some unique animations, but you will really need to forgive a lot to enjoy any of it. Even though this is a 32-bit game with loads of color and detail, I'll take the 16-bit visuals of the Mortal Kombat ports any day. At the very least, that had a flow and cadence that complemented the graphics they pulled off, even if they weren't as detailed.
Round one, fight! Ninja wins!
My god, did I hate the soundtrack used for this game. It's not anything against White Zombie directly. I mean, outside of the game, some of these songs rock, but the vocalized music just does not fit the action. It sounds like you are listening to your own music while playing, then something tailored to fit the actual characters and location here. It just drones on in the background as the match progresses, completely independent from the scene, the fighters, the story, and the outcome. It would have been one thing if it had only been instrumental versions of these songs, but the vocals just ruin it. I wish I could play a few sections for you with the soundtrack, but this is copyrighted material, so you'll need to check this one out on your own. There is no other way to say this, so let's just address it. Way of the Warrior is an absolutely awful playing game that fails on every level to be fun, even when boiled down to simple shits and giggles with a friend. It moves too fast and is almost spastic in nature. Just jumping around the stage and landing a proper attack is a struggle that will make most people run for the power button after a few minutes of confusion. The strict timings of the special moves mean you're gonna miss a lot of them for a while, and if you want to develop any form of regularity, it means spending more time than you'll want to suffering this experience. The 3DO controller itself could be blamed for a lot of that, but even with Capcom's Soldier Pad, this thing plays as bad as any fighting game I've experienced. Add in the constant throws by the AI, the disconnected soundtrack, and the lack of any type of satisfying conclusion, and Way of the Warrior is easily the worst fighting game on the 3DO, and a candidate for one of the worst ever. You can spend a few minutes giggling at the opening story and then get a few more laughs while fumbling with the terrible gameplay, but any serious attempt to play this is reserved only for those hell-bent on unnatural levels of forgiveness. The best parts of this stinker are playing as the overpowered bosses, lots of hidden characters, and the instruction manual, which contains character bios for the ragtag band of participants. Their background stories are intricate and amusing, but none of that translates to anything in the game. No real character-specific endings play off of those stories, keeping things shallow and disappointing. It may be difficult to understand now, but this was a monumental disappointment to me in 1994. I had paid a premium for the 3DO experience. $500 for a console that year was a huge investment, and getting a game of this mediocre quality was a gut punch. Aside from the graphics that we went over, the gameplay is atrocious on a level that bests even low-tier garbage like Criticom and Rise to Resurrection. Should you find yourself an owner of the 3DO and you've never played this one, I do recommend you give it a try, if only to appreciate the ports of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo and Samurai Showdown even more. This is easily up there with the most vile examples of gameplay and presentation of the 1990s, and a stain on the 3DO library that still leaves a bitter taste after all these years. Trash is too light a word for this mess. It is an absolute example of how not to make a fighting game, at least one that is fun and worth your time. Way of the Warrior was developed by a very young, very broke Naughty Dog, the company behind the eventual PlayStation hit Crash Bandicoot. With only a budget of $100,000, a handful of friends and relatives, the founders Jason Rubin and Andrew Gavin landed a contract with Universal Interactive Studios to publish this monstrosity. Luckily for them, they were on a platform with a fair amount of bad games, so even it stood out among that terrible pack. I wasn't the only one that had a rough time with Way of the Warrior. Magazines had a field day hating on it, a bunch of opinions I wish I had listened to prior to actually purchasing this. Electronic Gaming Monthly enjoyed the visuals but lamented the controls as utterly broken. Next Generation Magazine was just as tough, saying no amount of flashy sound and hyper-violence could make up for the lack of basic gameplay fundamentals. Many other magazines were negative as well, but you get the picture. This was a stinker and everyone knew it. The 3DO happens to have a handful of really well done fighting games. Not arcade perfect, mind you, but solid enough to understand the hardware was capable of some real fun with the genre. The real tragedy in all of this is that Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 was to get a legitimate release on the 3DO in 1996. That was never finished due to the market shrinking and the platform being abandoned. I can't imagine any amount of cutbacks would have made that port worse than what was on display here. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but this one right here was nothing more than a cash grab. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.